Hey guys, Sean and Jeff at Shock Surplus here.
What's up, guys?
We are going to go over the 2003 and up Toyota 4Runner, frequently asked questions. This also will apply to the GX 470 platforms. So the 2003 and up, you had a V6 and a V8 option between 03 and 09, and then 2010 and up, suspension didn't really change too much. So a lot of these answers that we'll get into on the 4Runner are going to apply 2003 and up, unless we're talking specifics on the XRES system or the KDSS system, which we'll get into the specifics on as well. Go ahead, Jeff.
So one of the our top asked questions is, when should I replace the shocks on my 4Runner?
And this is one of the most basic things when you're talking about a brand new vehicle owner and never replaced their shocks before, or maybe a second or third owner that doesn't have any idea about suspension. Typically, the normal wheel and tire shop always says between 30 and 50,000 miles, and that's pretty accurate. A lot of the factory shocks, which are just black shocks, pretty thin, those are only going to last between 30 and 50,000 miles, depending, of course, on your driving. Heck, there are even off-road versions here that are only going to last 30,000 miles, but they're designed that way. So typically, by 50,000 miles, definitely think about replacing your shocks. We can give you some guidance on what to feel for to kind of make that decision, help you make that decision yourself. A lot of aftermarket shocks, something like a Bilstein, is going to last much longer than 50,000 miles, frequently up to 100,000, 150,000 miles with really good damping characteristics still. So it's really going to come down to A, what shocks are on there right now, B, have they ever been replaced before, are you the brand new owner and have never touched the suspension? We'd like to talk to you a little bit about that for your specific scenario, but in general, start thinking about it between around 50,000 miles as kind of recommended.
Yeah, to add on to that, the harder you are on the truck, or the harder you are on the suspension, the sooner that they'll need to be replaced. The shock fluid breaks down and softens up, and that's why you get a softer feeling ride. Another question we get a lot is, do I need to purchase upper control arms for the front suspension that I'm putting on the truck?
We typically most manufacturers are going to require that at the 3-inch lift range. We start recommending it based on driving behavior, like around 2.5 inches of lift. You can get away with factory arms at 2.5 inches of lift if it's just a mall crawler daily driver and you don't really see a lot of dirt. But the more dirt and the more off-road use you see, to where that wheel and tire is like drooping out from the suspension quite a bit, that's going to start pegging that upper control arm to the shock tower. So as you hit 2.5 inches of lift, that's really going to start coming into play. When you get to 3 inches or 3.5 inches of lift, that factory arm is just going to be pegged down, ruining alignment, making contact with the shock tower, and kind of limiting articulation. So at the 3 inches, definitely required. 2.5 inches, not required, but recommended. 2 inches, neither. You can factory align at 2 inches of lift, no problem. I know, Jeff, you got a lot to say about control arms.
Yeah, so one of the biggest benefits from going with an aftermarket control arm, upper control arm, is especially if you're going off-road a lot, is the ball joints on the aftermarket upper control arms are going to be a lot stronger.
Yep.
And that ball joint is also what offers more travel, so that upper control arm is able to cycle more travel as the struts or the coilovers are going through its range of motion. And then the added benefit of aftermarket upper control arms is there's some caster correction, because when you lift the truck, the ball joints and the spindles, they get moved to a different angle. And so what the aftermarket upper control arms do is it corrects that caster. So when it comes to getting an alignment done on the truck, you're able to get close to factory alignment numbers. Another thing that increased caster does is it moves your tires a little bit forward in the wheel well. Mm-hmm. So it'll help with clearing larger tires as well.
Yeah. Big thing when you're trying to fit 33s or even 34s on a 3-inch or 3.5-inch lift.
Yep. And do I need rear springs if I'm installing the 6112s or Fox 2.0s or any lift on the front for that matter?
We get this surprisingly a lot. Typically on a Fox 2.0 or an IBOC or a Bilstein 6112s, these are sometimes purchased as like standalone leveling options. And when you're talking about like a 2-inch or 2.5 inches of lift from the front coilover, you typically don't need to touch the rear end, meaning the rear springs or the rear leaf springs if you've got a light truck. But on the 4Runner, typically 2.5 inches is going to level out that vehicle front to back. So the biggest, you can answer this for yourself by measuring from the center of the wheel to the fender in the front and the rear. You'll probably get, 27 inches in the front and 29 inches in the back. Don't quote me on that, but you start to see the differences in the front ride height and in the rear ride height. And that'll let you determine how much lift you need out of a coilover or an adjustable height strut in the front to level out that vehicle. Rear springs are really only needed or recommended if you're going to be loading up the rear with a heavier bumpers, rooftop tent, more camping gear, recovery gear that's going to run you an additional 100 pounds, 400 pounds constant load. And when you do that, then naturally the rear end is going to sag on factory coils. And that's when we would recommend maybe a 1-inch or 2-inch rear coil to match kind of a front leveling option.
And let's see, I have a V8 4Runner and use it 90% or mostly as a daily driver. Goes off-roading a couple of times a month on easy trails, but they want an aggressive looking 2.5 or 3-inch lift. What would you recommend?
Yeah, so if you're trying to get to the 3-inch lift, so one of the problems that we see on a lot of people want a 3-inch lift to fit a larger wheel and tire package, right? And there's a couple of ways to get there. One of them, unfortunately, a Fox 2.0 or an IBOC 5100 or a Bilstein 5100 or a Bilstein 6112. A lot of these options max out at 2.5 inches of lift through the strut or the coilover. If you really want to go 3-inch, a lot of people consider spacers. We definitely don't recommend spacers. But one of the problems is the budget jump from one of these or an adjustable height strut to a full 2.5-inch coilover is significant, almost twice the price to get your 3 inches of desired lift. But along with that is it's overkill for a lot of people that just want 3 inches of lift, right? So you can run an adjustable height strut like the 5100 with a spacer on top. You can just run a 3-inch spacer if it's just going to be a daily driver, not seeing any dirt. We don't recommend that, but just shooting straight talk, a lot of our customers just run factory replacement Bilsteins with a 3-inch spacer on top. And that'll get the job done. You can run your bigger wheels and tires. As long as you're not hitting the dirt and aggressive off-road, it's going to be fine. But don't be surprised if your mounts on the front of your struts break, get warped, or any kind of other kind of damage on your front end components if you decide to go the cheap route. I know that there's probably some other options I missed to get 3 inches.
As far as budget goes, that's pretty much it on the budget end of everything.
These iBox are actually are they offering 3 inches on the 4Runner now?
On some models. Okay. So kind of looking at these two as an example, these are both for a 4Runner. These iBox will provide more lift than these Fox 2.0s. And the reason for that is because they're just physically a longer shock. There's a little bit more travel in the coilover, so that will allow you to do a full 3-inch lift and not have the shock top out too much. They are a new offering from iBoC, and and something that is worth looking into if you do want that full 3-inch on a budget setup.
Yeah, nice.
Let's see. And so I have another question we got is I have a 4Runner trail with KDSS. What is the difference between in the Bilstein shocks that are designated for a vehicle with KDSS and without KDSS?
Yeah, so this is a big thing for the 2010 and up. I'm going to just read here because it's kind of detail heavy. So the shocks themselves, so like the actual shock valving themselves is not the differentiating part. It's actually the springs that are coming with the coilovers. So on the 6112s or any of these really are going to be, usually what happens is left and right on the 6112s, the iBox, the Fox 2.0s, all of these besides the Bilstein 8112s and the BP 51s, these are the only ones running left and right as far as I know, right?
Yeah.
So these are actually including different springs on the left unit and the right unit. Same thing with the BP 51s.
It's actually the same spring.
Okay.
The reservoir mounting is different.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. So yeah, on something like these setups, the reservoir mounting is different because of the way the KDSS system is running in the front. The other thing is that we were talking about was the lean factor with the KDSS as well, right?
Yeah, so on a lot of the Toyotas and other trucks for that matter, the battery, the gas tank, and the driver is all on the same side. So you get what a lot of people refer to as Toyota lean. And that's just because there's more weight on the driver's side than there is on the passenger side. So with the Bilstein 6112s, for example, when we do the assemblies on these, on the KDSS, when we're doing an assembly for the KDSS optioned vehicles, the circlip settings would be the same on both the passenger and the driver's side. Whereas if we're doing the assembly on 6112s for a non-KDSS equipped vehicle, we do the 6112 assembly one notch higher on the driver's side than on the passenger side, and the reason for that is to accommodate for any of that Toyota lean. When you have the KDSS system, KDSS is a RAM assisted sway bar, and when you have that KDSS system, it'll compensate for any kind of lean that you get if you're using the same strut settings, same coilover settings on both sides.
Yeah, on a factory KDSS versus a factory non-KDSS, you could probably expect to see lean on the non-KDSS because on the KDSS, there's actually a hydraulic system that's evening out the vehicle in the front and in the rear to kind of stay as planted, as flat as possible through turns. So it's a very active system. So that's why some coilovers like the 6112s, you can get higher lift out of the KDSS system versus not because of the staggered settings. And that's going to apply for a lot of just full coilover packages.
Let's see. And at which point would I need heavier duty springs for the front of the truck?
Yeah, this is a very complicated answer because people see the heavier duty springs as providing more lift, and so sometimes they're after the HD springs just to get more lift, but they also don't know that comes with a much firmer ride unless you're having additional weight placed on those springs. So in my own experience, when I used, for instance, the Fox 2.0 coilovers, going from like a stock setup to an aftermarket bumper setup, which was about an additional 125 pounds, the ride became much softer and I actually liked it a lot more. Whereas if you put on HD springs, you're going to keep that same amount of lift. So for instance, the Bilstein 6112s, you're going to, at the top setting on a 4Runner, you'll get 2.5 inches of lift. But when you put on an ARB bumper and a winch, you're probably looking at an additional 300 pounds. You're probably going to lose probably a full inch of that 2.5 inches. So now you're riding at 1.5 inches over factory ride height on just the basic 600 pound rated spring. When you go to upgraded spring, HD springs, there's a 650 pound and there's a 700 pound option. So depending on how much extra weight you're going to be having through the bumpers or through the winch, or if you're considering HD springs for the back, all of these different weight requirements and also ride quality requirements too, because if you aren't too concerned with lift, you could still run the base setup and get actually a pretty plush ride, or just run one step up on the HD spring, not get as firm of a ride or as much lift, but still be able to accommodate that weight. And not all aftermarket bumpers weigh roughly the same. I did some research. Relentless Fabrication, their front bumper weighs 110 pounds, whereas ARB's weighs 240 pounds, and then CBI's weighs 200 pounds. And all of these manufacturers, they all have their own little features, full bull bar, or steel versus aluminum, which is going to offset those weights by a little bit. So if you're really a stickler for how much extra weight you're running, plus spring rates, plus how much height you need, there's no one answer that's going to be for everybody. It's very specific to your driving style, plus weight load out, all that kind of stuff, wheel and tire size. No one size fits all.
Yeah, and that's a huge benefit for like the coilovers with the adjustable valving, is because you could in theory run a lighter weight spring and just kind of adjust the height on the collars and use the compression damping on the variable compression coilovers and firm that up so you have a lighter spring, and you firm up the valving to help prevent bottoming out, and that would give you pretty much the ultimate ride quality. Even on my own personal truck, I've gone from a 650 pound spring and I've gone down to a 600 pound spring, and I'm just running a little bit more valving or a little bit more compression on the adjusters. I'm running the Fox DSCs on my Tacoma.
Yeah, so basically the baseline is softer, and then you're able to use the compression settings to kind of fine tune that to kind of for how little or how much control you have. Yeah, because a firmer spring up front is going to just naturally be firmer and naturally give more control, because the spring itself is acting as kind of a dampening mechanism, and then the shock. So when the spring up front is softer, now the shock is kind of doing more of the work that it's supposed to do, which is actually control the spring energy in the vehicle. Gotcha, makes sense.
And can I remove the XRES system in my 4Runner?
Yeah, so the XRES, which is XRES system, I don't remember what it stands for, but you kind of see it all over the place. And the unfortunate thing about that is that aftermarket shocks, you can't put aftermarket shocks on an XRES system because the factory units are all connected at all four corners with hydraulic lines. Now, it's very easy to remove it because the system doesn't talk to the engine, doesn't talk to the ECU, doesn't really have, it's not really mingled in with the rest of the truck. So you're basically able to tear it out, tear all four corners out, tear out the hydraulic lines and then running to all four corners, and you'll be set. You can basically do that and then put in aftermarket parts just as easily as a non-XRES system.
To kind of follow up on that, what about the people with KDSS? Can you remove KDSS from the 4Runners?
From what I can tell and what I've seen, you can. So the KDSS system is only on 2010 and up, like what Jeff was just talking about. It's a hydraulically assisted sway bar system. So there's two hydraulic active pistons on, sorry, there's four. So there's a system front and the rear.
Yeah, it's
Or is it one and one? Okay, yeah, sorry about that. So there's one piston in the front, one piston in the back, and you could basically remove the sway bars, and then the pistons basically get deactivated at that point. You collapse them, and you can clamp them and tie them off so that they're just permanently collapsed, or you can actually remove the whole system, remove the plumbing, and then you can, I don't know specifically how to counteract the fuse to where it's not, firing a bunch of signals at you in the dash, but it is removable. We won't get into details here because I haven't done it myself, but very doable. The benefits, though, that's left to be kind of figured out.
Yeah, there have been a few people that I've talked to that consider doing it, and after looking at all the steps involved in actually removing it the right way, they've kind of just said it's not worth it.
Yeah, and apparently one of the engineers for Toyota said that a KDSS equipped 4Runner is actually going to articulate better off-road than a non-KDSS because on everyday driving on pavement and twisties and just normal road, that KDS system is working to keep the vehicle super flat, very planted, very controlled. But when it starts kind of sensing the big obstacles at slower speeds, it disables the assist, the pistons, to allow for basically as much articulation as the suspension is going to allow. Whereas on the non-KDSS system, that sway bar it's static and it's fully engaged at all time, no matter what the speed is. So essentially, you're looking at non-KDSS being the least amount of articulation, KDSS being more articulation, and then no sway bar entirely being the most articulation. But then you kind of lose the benefits of on-road kind of handling. So doable, but are the benefits there? Not so much when there's when the aftermarket offerings are basically the same.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
and with the TRD Pro coming out, or with the TRD Pros out, what shocks are equivalent to what people are getting on the TRD Pros right now?
Yeah. So it used to be there was no equivalent, right? Because the main thing of the TRD Pro is the internal bypass, right? I don't think there's any other shock or any other features on it. So they have an internal bypass, and then they got a reservoir that is piggyback on the lower mount. Surprisingly, Fox does not offer a equivalent to the TRD Pros. You probably could custom order an internal bypass coilover for that, but it's not an off-the-shelf product. Their highest end shock is the DSC. So but not really. It's not the same functionality as the internal bypass. The closest that you're going to get to internal bypass is these Old Man Emu BP51s, which are internal bypass, compression, and rebound adjustments. But let's talk about internal bypass and what that actually means. So Fox, their internal bypass is they're trying to achieve daily driver ride comfort, and then kind of using their race technology to limit full droop and full compression actions kind of off-road, right?
Yeah. So the way an internal bypass works is you have your shock body, and in that shock body is your bypass sleeve. And in that bypass sleeve, there's ports, the bypass ports. So as that piston is cycling through the suspension, depending on the rate that the piston is flowing through the fluid, the shock fluid will kind of bleed through the bypass ports, and either getting a little bit firmer bottom out protection, or increasing your rebound compression. It's kind of the basics of internal bypass.
On this Old Man Emu right here, so this is like a 2 point, I think we measured at 2.9 or 2.8 inches of in thickness, but it's only a 51 millimeter piston inside, which is much closer to the size of this body right here. So they're using all that extra space for the actual bypass ports, which are kind of illustrated on this body by the up and down lines. So That's where the bleed ports are, so to recirculate the oil around the piston. So the BP51s are the closest thing you're going to get to a TRD Pro as far as like the internal bypass function. But really, if you're trying to achieve TRD Pro suspension, that's not really the question you should be asking. You should be asking like, are you looking for mostly 90% comfort and some off-road ability? Are you looking for 50 and 50? There's a wide range of products that kind of address whatever needs you want. Internal bypass, not many options, but is that really kind of the question? Is that really the answer you're looking for? So yeah, the BP51s, only thing with bypass. Fox DSE, only thing with dual speed compression. King and Icon both have single speed compression. Basically, it's like as budget increases, is how many features you want.
Yeah, the 8100s don't have any compression adjustments, but there's a lot of technology on the internals that kind of make up for there not being adjustments, and super cool on the 8100s.
Yeah, so these have no adjustment settings. They're not flashy, but I think they're one of the most technically advanced shock out there, because instead of like a internal bypass, essentially Bilstein has made it that the middle ride zones are very comfortable for your daily driver and whatnot. And then they basically included two miniature shocks or bump stops within the shock themselves at max bottom out and max top out. So imagine it just being very soft in the middle or very comfortable in the middle, and then on the hard off-road aggressive terrain, there's valving and there's other cutoffs that prevent max travel within the shock itself. So once again, no internal bypass, but the different features of the shock kind of act in a similar way to achieve similar results of comfort mixed with off-road capabilities. And that goes for a lot of different these shocks here. They all kind of achieve similar results through different valving, through different features, adjustments, spring lengths. So it's not a one answer for everybody. It's really what you're going for with your 4Runner.
Yeah, one of my questions for a lot of customers that call in and ask us for suggestions on suspension setups for their own vehicles is the first thing I'll normally ask is what kind of driving you do, and what kind of driving you do, what kind of driving you plan on doing, and how do you like to drive. And that kind of leads us into that brings us to kind of a direction as to what we would recommend for you that would fit best.
Yeah, there's no one best shock for all 4Runners. It's really what you're after, how much, what kind of driving you do, what kind of weight you're going to see. A slow moving trail rig with a family or a bunch of gear is a much different shock recommendation than a single bachelor running around Anza Borrego. So reach out to us, support@shocksurplus.com. Hit us up in the comments, DM us, where to reach us. We'd love to help out with your guys' rig. Thanks so much for watching.